I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we journey through history and heritage with Bernadette Inclan, author of The Perils of Beginnings. This captivating memoir blends Tejano history, family secrets, and Mexican-American culture as it follows the lives of José Narciso Cavazos and his descendants. With vivid storytelling, mystery, and humor, this book brings to life the struggles and triumphs of a family whose legacy helped shape Texas history. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her compelling book. The links are below the interview. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
I love the title, The Perils of Beginnings. It's very profound, very prophetic, very wise. What made you choose that as your title?
I had a lot of trouble with the title. In fact, the book was finished without a title, and I sent it out to beta readers, and everybody was contributing. I asked everybody to think of what a good title. And this is a true story. I was waking up, those early hours of the morning when you're just waking up and it's time to get up, and the perils of beginnings came to my head. I jumped out of bed and ran and wrote it down because I knew I would never remember it.
Right.
And that's how it began. And it's really, like you say, prophetic because it's about both
Perils
the
and Beginnings.
the earlies and yeah.
Yeah. It's really wonderful. They actually say the best time of day to write is early morning when you're in that dreamlike state still. So you tapped into that creative energy. They actually say it's why a lot of writers drink, is so they get into that fog and then they can be creative. It's better to wake up and write than to drink and write. Let's just say it, put it there. Let's talk about Jose Narciso Cavazos, and I'm sure I'm slaughtering his name because I'm not good at Spanish pronunciations, but how did you discover his story and his land grant?
Okay. Well, my brother was accepting an award. We are the descendants of the first families of Bexar County. Okay. On my father's side. And he had to do a presentation. So he presented the story of Narcissus. This was back in 90, maybe 2000, but anyway, a while ago. And I remember him talking about it now is the King Ranch of Texas, or part of the King Ranch of Texas. And the people in the audience gasped. They just didn't believe it. And so I thought, I don't know my Tejano history either. And, we're Cavazos on my mother. Well, we're Cavazos on both sides. We won't go into that. But I just started beginning the research on Narciso, and sure enough, he got 600,000 acres of land in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. But it was considered no man's land. Nobody else
Right.
wanted it. So
Right.
for him to have accepted that challenge says a lot about him.
Mm.
So I wanted to tell his story and of course, that story is made up. I did a lot of research, but I put individuals that I grew up with, uncles, my dad. I never had grandparents on both sides. They were all gone by the time my brother and I came along. So I just just knowing how they were, I've been to La Hacienda de los Cavazos in Nuevo León, Mexico. Daddy was born on the land grant. So I knew a lot of history already, but
So
in
what you
Mexico.
did was you took the history, connected the dots, made some, literary leaps, added a little fiction here and there to fill in the blanks and created your book, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Initially, when I started writing the book, I went to critique groups and nobody was enjoying the story. And in fact, one guy finally had the guts to tell me, "You just gave me another history dump." And that's not what I wanted. I wanted people to say, wow, this is a great story. This is exciting. And I had to manipulate my brain to work that way. I was a scientist for 45 years. So learning creative writing is an art. You have to study it. And so that was and I wasn't offended by that history dump. I needed to hear that because nobody was responding to my story. And then they gave me some hints, and everybody began to contribute. They gave me hints, and that's how the story evolved. I decided to make it the road trip, which I actually had with my aunt, but I was 14 at the time and we didn't go into Mexico. But I changed it to when I was finished my freshman year in college, and it gave her an opportunity, or it gave the story an opportunity to tell Narcisso's side.
Very cool. I think that was no pun intended. I think the road trip was a great vehicle to tell the story.
Thank you.
Without a doubt. And I think what you did was kind of logical for a writer, whereas you take all the data, you take all the facts, and you compile it, and then you realize all you have is a pile of facts and a pile of data, albeit
Correct.
interesting, each segment of its own, but weaving it together into a story that people want to listen to is the art of the craft. And obviously, you perfected that now with some input from others, which is wonderful. And the road trip mirrors the themes of discovery and heritage in the book, right? Tell us a little
That
bit
is
about
correct.
that.
That's correct. Well, Barbara was very isolated in Galveston. She was born with a birth defect. And I mean, up until she was in her junior year in high school, she was always put into casts or braces, one or the other, which really restricted life in Galveston. I mean, I never learned how to swim, and I lived on an island. And the only thing she had to look forward to was to come back to Galveston, go to work, maybe take a summer course to get it out of the way, that kind of thing that you do when you're young. You don't appreciate your learning until much older. And then the opportunity for the trip came up, and that's really what set everything in motion, is that, oh boy, I don't have to go back to Galveston. I went to an all-girls private school, and most of the girls traveled after, during the summer. So I wasn't going to be united with close friendships or anything like that. So, or Barbara wasn't, excuse me. So the road trip opened up the opportunity for a trip of a lifetime.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of El Agustadero de San Juan de Caracitos. Again, apologize.
El agastudero just means land, the
Uh,
land, el agastudero. So that's why I kind of switched. And I think I did say that was I referred to San Juan de Caracitos. Okay. It was a large land grant that he did give pieces of it to his ancestors, or to his descendants, rather. When Narciso wrote his last will, and we have copies of his last will, he was giving a portion of his land to every one of his children. He had quite a few children, and of course, their children. But by the time Texas was part of the United States, it was being taken away. And so there's still a lot of Cavazos here in Texas. I mean, I,
right.
I, I find them in the cemeteries,
Wow.
but I'm not close to the Rio Grande Tejanos like I am more in Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about the challenges Narciso faced starting his life in the Texas wilderness.
Well, there were the Comanches and the Apaches, and you can't blame them because
Yeah.
their land was being taken over. Not only their land, but their sources of food. The
Hmm.
animals that they hunted for food were also having to move away because of the settlers that were coming in. He had to start the water system. I mean, he had to do everything from the ground up. He also had uh, Spain required him to do so much, like say in 5 years' time. He had to have a house, he had to have a place where people could commune, he had to have not running water, but he had to have water wells. He had to be able to start crops. There were a lot of challenges, and so we never did I was never able to find out how many people he actually brought from Mexico, well, from Nuevo León, because Texas was part of Mexico at that time. Uh, but we do know how many cattle and animals that he was able to bring over. So it was quite a lot. So it meant he had to build shelters for the animals. There was a lot he had to encounter. At the time that Narciso came, the Indians were not, the American Indians were not as aggressive. So, they'd give them little hints like steal some cattle or something along those lines. But it was later after Narciso was gone that we see a lot of death by Indian wars
Wow.
in the
Amazing.
genealogies. Mhm.
Amazing. It's just like really like starting a civilization when you come into uncharted territory. And that's what's so profound about this story. Just have a minute or two left. Wanted to ask you, what was the most surprising thing you uncovered during your research? Was there something that was like, wow, I can't believe that really happened? Or was there a moment like that?
Yes, my parents are related.
You mentioned that before. I mean, I guess in that era, a lot of cousins were marrying. It was to keep wealth, it was to keep land, and there were a
Had
lot of
Mhm.
practical reasons for it, right? So your parents are distant cousins, I guess, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
they stuck with pedigree. There's a saying in Spanish, la sangre se busca. And
gotcha.
what that, it's a hard one to translate, but what it means is like, this is a terrible word, like pedigrees attract each other, you
Yeah,
know. But I mean, that was part of Spanish society.
right.
So
I,
it
I
wasn't
think it
a
was
new,
part of every society. I think if you look
yeah.
at the monarchies around the world, they all were marrying their cousins and so forth because they didn't want to give up power, they didn't want to give up wealth, they didn't want to give up land. Amazing. This is an amazing story. Would you like to see it as a movie? I think it could be a movie, particularly the road trip and flashbacks of what happened and seeing the different artifacts.
Oh, it'd be great as a movie.
Yeah,
In fact, a couple of my readers have told me that, but
yeah,
a step at a time,
exactly.
this is my very first book.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Do you have
So
another planned?
I have another one in the works, and
Hmm.
it's going to draw a little bit the generation that came after Narciso, but more in the 1900s. In fact, it's
Wonderful.
during the Depression.
Wonderful. Sounds great. The name of the book is The Perils of Beginnings. It is a captivating memoir that blends Tejano history, family secrets, and Mexican American culture as it follows the lives of José Narciso Cavazos and his descendants. It is a terrific read. It is very compelling. You'll learn a lot about Mexican American history and the formation of Texas. It's a great story. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time on Spotlight.